Hi everyone! So today I want to do something quite experimental and start playing in my Dylusions journal, which is fantastic for mixed media. And I think, I bought this a while ago because I wanted to be a little bit more daring when it comes to mixed media and create some lovely layouts in a journal. And this journal seems to be highly recommended by a lot of mixed media artists because the paper is very thick. It's got a bit of off-white color, and it's got that kind of very sturdy cardboard cover, and it just looks like a journal that you want to get messy and dirty and just really let it go. I mean, that's what I really want to try and do this year. I want to kind of see how far I can go when it comes to experimentation in art. So I thought I'll keep this journal for purely that. It won't be watercolor illustrations, it won't be any of the other stuff that I do. This purely will be for when I want to dip into mixed media and have fun. So it's by Ranger, and like I said, it's the Dylusion journal. Alright, so the other good thing about it is how this journal is designed to be very much able to take a lot of art abuse in that sense. And so you can stick your fountain pen or like a gel pen if you want to have it there, and it makes it really nice and neat, and you can carry it around with you if you have a favorite pen to do some sketching. And like I said, it's done in a really good way. So the binding is beautifully done. It's all stitched. You can basically lay it completely flat. That's what I like. So there you go. You can see how flat it lays with no problems. Even if you go further into the journal, you just need to press it a little bit, but it's quite good. You get a little pocket here, which is fantastic for keeping embellishments or postcards, for example. I've got a bunch of postcards here, which I can take inspiration from. So this is various art exhibitions I went to before I had my son, when I had my life. So yeah, it's been really good. And so this is Kusama Fashions. Loads of different things, Kate Moss, and so I'm going to keep those for inspiration, and I can keep them basically here. And the other thing is it folds out, so like that, so you can keep quite a bit of stuff in there, and it's also easy to reach in without ripping anything. So that's why I love this journal. I also like that it comes in this small size. There is a bigger size if you prefer to work in bigger size journals, but me personally, I always like to work in smaller sized journals. So I'm just trying to get this in like that, and then you can just close it up and it will sit neatly there. So just to brief you a little bit what I'm going to be doing today. First of all, it's going to be the first project, and I wanted to show you that the first page is glued a little bit further onto the cardboard cover. So if I would want to illustrate anything on this side, it would be quite awkward unless I completely bend it, and that would mean that I'll have a nice big crease here, which I don't want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this first page onto the cardboard, so I don't want to see the cardboard as well. And that way I'm going to have a nice flat opening immediately with nothing ugly there. So that's what I'm going to do to begin with, and I'm going to use the Tombow. The rest of the things, basically, I got inspired by this book, Just Add Watercolor. I have featured it in one of the previous videos, which you can find a little flip through of it. It is great because it's filled with all sorts of contemporary artists' work and predominantly watercolor, but there are also other mediums that are used with watercolor, which is what I like. That makes it mixed media, and it's fantastic for getting a lot of inspiration. So today I want to create something that is a little bit abstract, but I want to create a sense of a forest, like a maybe whimsical flower forest. What I want to do is I want to create flower prints, flower cutouts, and then also textures. So that's the idea, everything to be floral, and I want that to be kind of very pastel colors. So I will be doing a narration to this because these type of videos take a long time, and I have given myself an hour for this project, so I will have to edit the video basically. So what I wanted to show you before I start is a number of things that I have laid out here. So I've got 3 pages. So this is like a charcoal kind of black, or like chalkboard kind of type of look paper, and this one is a pastel peach, pastel coral kind of color with nice chevron patterns. And finally I picked this print, like a newspaper print type of paper, which has all the cool words here and all the positive stuff. So yes, the idea is that I will be die cutting flowers of these papers, and for the die cuts I'm thinking of using these 2. So it's the Tim Holtz alternation, and it's the Wildflowers 1, which is this one. Is it? No, 2. So this is the 1 and this is the 2. So I've got both collections and they are gorgeous. So I'm looking forward to creating a nice little forest. For the background, I'm thinking of doing a bit of gesso at the bottom of the page, and I also want to use some watercolor, but with the packaging technique, which is when you take one of those plastic envelopes from, actually you could, if you don't have that and you have one of those envelopes, you could use the envelopes for that as well. The idea is that you just have a plastic kind of packaging that you keep, and anything we buy these days come in these, so just keep a few of them, and what you do is you can either spray some inks or some color shines onto this, or you can take a brush and just do some watercolor mixes on here, and then you just turn it over and you press it onto the paper to create interesting look. So there is no need for me to explain anymore, because I might not use the products that I have laid out, but one of the things that I definitely want to use is this Maggie Holmes flower clear stamp set from the Willow lane, because it's just absolutely beautiful. So I will see how I get on, and I will explain everything that I'm doing. This is a bit of a long intro, but I hope you will enjoy it. So let's start. Okay, so the first thing that I'm doing is I'm going to prepare the pages by using a bit of gesso, and here, just to avoid some mess, I decided to use a tear-off palette, and using a palette knife I'm just going to try and create texture on the bottom of the pages. So I don't want to cover the entire page or pages in gesso, just the bottom of it, and kind of fading out towards the top of the pages. And I just start off by applying it with the palette knife, and then also, as you can see, trying to create some little scratches, and that will create an interesting texture for when I'm going to use wet mediums like watercolors or inks. Also, this particular spatula or palette knife is great for using or collecting the remaining gesso and putting it back into the jar. Now, with what was left on the tier of palette, I then stamped it onto the papers, and that created even more texture, which I actually really like. I prefer that look to the palette knife because it's sort of the texture is a little bit more rougher, but yeah, the watercolor will look very pretty and the inks will look very pretty on it. So there I glued the first page, as I explained in the intro, to the cardboard cover. And now I'm grabbing Tim Holtz Distress ink. This is a mini one, and the color is Tattered Rose, which is perfect. It's sort of that beautiful pale peach color. And I'm using the packaging technique by just kind of stamping it onto it and then spraying some water and then placing that onto the gesso, which you can see there are some speckles on the paper that don't have gesso and it looks different on there. So for example there, that was the paper without gesso. So the next thing, I am just repeating the exact same process, just to create a little bit more variety in the patterns. And between the layers, I'm just drying it so that it will look a little bit dark on some parts. Here I grabbed the empty washi tape in powder pastel, I think it's called, pastel powder blue. And at the back, on the last page of the journal, I kind of use it as a little tester page. So I put down the name, because once you throw out the packaging of the empty tape, you won't know what it's called. And because some of you might be interested, I keep a little note of that. So I used the washi tape just to add another medium, another texture, and washi tape kind of makes look everything a little bit more modern. So here I'm using the watercolor, which is Core, and it's called Cobalt Teal, which is a very, very beautiful bright teal. And I'm doing a number of things. I'm doing the as Vicky Button calls it, the kissing technique, just touching the packaging a little bit on the paper, and also I dripped it onto the pages and then tilted the journal to create a dripping effect. So that's again just layering and building on different textures. So here I'm proceeding to acrylics, and this is a lovely color. I haven't mixed it here with anything just yet. This is what it looks like when it comes out of the tube, and the color is turquoise. It's the heavy body acrylic paint by Dina Veckley. So there I also decided to mix in the Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus watercolor in titanium white. Now you have to be careful with that one because it will remain sticky unless you really dab it off. Even after you use a heat tool to dry it off, it will still be tacky. So you will have to take a little bit of tissue and just make sure you dab off all the residue. So again, in some areas I just dropped that Hydrus white watercolor and created yet again more texture. So then I decided to dip into my Faber-Castell gelato crayons. They're water soluble and I don't use them very often, but they are great for mixed media type of layout. And so here I'm using a number of colors. So I used the yellow, which is a buttercream. I used the blue, which is cotton candy, and then I also added a little bit of spearmint, and then that was the green, and then the dark blue is the blueberry, to get to the right shade of the turquoise. And then I tried to stamp with it using the Maggie Holmes Willow Lane clear stamps, and it was a little bit tricky just because when you have too much water there, as you can see on the first image on the top of the page, it's not very accurate, it's very loose, but it does look nice. And then when you have less water, you get a little bit more detail, so you have to play around with it. Now I'm attempting to mix up a peach color by mixing the guava, which is that pale pink, with a bit of mango, and it came out a very nice color. So again, now using another flower stamp from that same stamp set and doing the same technique, but you can barely see anything because for one, the color is very pale, and two, it's very loose of an image. So I just I'm going ahead and just adding a little bit more of that orange just to bring out the color a little bit more, just to deepen it. Then I decided to grab the second color from the Tim Holtz Distress inks, and it's the Wild Honey. It's very lovely, again using the last page of the journal to test it and see how it would look like if I just stamp straight with the ink, or whether, like here, I stamped it onto a mat and then diffused it a little bit with water, and that gives you different effects. So again, play around and see what you like, whether you like a loose image or a more detailed one with with basically more lines that are printed. So here I'm using that Wild Honey. It's a really nice orange, a very warm orange, and in some areas I want more detail, and that's when I go straight in with the stamps. Now I pulled out that another orange there that you can see, but I will not actually use it because it's a little bit too orangey. So I decided to keep it within the color scheme and use more of the Tattered Rose. So go back to that Distress ink, the first one that I used, and then start stamping the leaves so that it correlates with the area that I have done the stamps on in the beginning of the process. So I'm also adding those leaves on the top where that turquoise big flower stamp was, and that breaks it down a little bit and creates kind of like an embellishment area there, because nothing else is in that area. So that's why I'm using more of the leaf stems. And then I'm switching between the two colors, so the Tattered Rose and then the Wild Honey again for the leaves, and you can see that looks really lovely, and it starts to make it look quite whimsical and quite like a magic forest is what I was going for originally, and quite happy with that look, as you can see here. So the next thing that I'm doing is switching to a smaller leaf, again from the same stamp set from Maggie Holmes from the Willow Lane collection. So I used 4 stamps, the big large flower there, the turquoise one, then the smaller flower, and then 2 leaves, the larger and the smaller. Okay, here I am now picking out those 3 pages. By the way, these papers are from the Pebbles Jen Hadfield collection, and I got them at Holmes, I think 2 years ago maybe, and they were discounted, so I think that was, you know, a long time ago the collection came out. So I don't know if you can still find it, but I will try to see if I can find it on Amazon still and leave a link for you. So I'm using these Thinlits die cuts by Holtz for Sizzix, and it's the Wildflower #2 set, and it's just so stunning in terms of how delicate it is. It's really pretty, and you can see you will need one of those picks to get out the image, because the lines are so super delicate and fine and thin that it will be stuck in the metal frame of the die cuts. So I cut out the same, so I picked 3 different flowers and I cut it out in 3 different papers so that I have a nice mix. And I'm trying to build up a story here of that whimsical forest, and so I'm placing these leaves kind of in a strategic way, and I want them to look different even when I'm using the same die cut. So I will trim some of them and misplace them a little bit so that they look different. Like you can see, this one is exactly the same as on each side, so the peach and the black on each side is the same die cut. So I then decided to use the Distress Collage medium in matte by Holtz and adhere it, use it as a glue, and that worked really well. Okay, so this is where I got to in 2 hours. I really have taken my time. I wasn't rushing, and I wanted to just kind of go with it and create loads of lovely things. Looking at this, there's a flower missing here actually that I would like to stamp. Anyways, I'm going to do this in a bit. So the best way that I found out to glue these flowers was to put the Distress Collage medium onto my mat and then kind of tacking the little delicate die cuts into it. And then the best tip I could give you, actually, that worked out really well for me, I'm using these mini tags, and to avoid smearing what's underneath, what I would do is just kind of start from the bottom and then really quickly tap on every single little bit, because you don't want the leaves to start coming off. They're very delicate, obviously. Once you've done that, you then can take a piece of tissue and just dab off the excess. But when it dries matte, so that's the good thing about this collage medium, that it won't be glossy and looking like there is glue under there. In fact, you can see it looks very neat and clean. And that's what I've done, and it worked out really well. The other thing is, if you have missed out on a little leaf, you can just pull it up if it comes off, and then you can take a little bit of that glue and just smear it with a corner of this tag underneath and then press it down. So it's a really nice little tool that I could recommend. Now I wanted to show you how I would clean my mat, because the glue is now dried on here. So what I would do is just take one of those palette knives that are very useful. So this came in a set, and then you just kind of rub it like that, so you're not scratching anything, but you're just taking off the glue off, and it's perfectly clean underneath. So I love this Ranger, what is it called, craft mat. It's I love using it for all sorts of purposes. You could see that I was putting paint on there, my inks. It doesn't go through, and you can minimize the time on pulling out other gadgets that you may need. And that's it. That's all clean now. So it's perfectly smooth and ready to go for your next project. I really like how this came out. It looks really good. I might add some other washes maybe on top with a little bit of pattern or something, but I'll see. Anyway, so this is the layout for today, and I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I certainly had loads of fun creating it. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.